Hello and welcome to the Walk and Talk for today. It is Tuesday, and we've got quite a bit of news, including some blasts from the past politically. And we'll get right into that in just a moment here. But I want to talk to you about the outdoors. Let us know what you think in the comments. We've been mixing it up. We've been testing a lot of different looks here in the studio. Let us know what you like, what you don't like in terms of segments and shows. Let us know what you like and you don't like, what we should be doing more of, what we can improve on. We are listening and we read every comment. So and also if you want to send us an email, if you don't want to write it in the comments, just go to DennisMcCullinch.com and look for the Submit News button. Click on that, and you can drop us an email, and Dennis will go through that and we'll get back to you, or we'll take it to heart. So let's get right into the news. We have a lot to cover. I wanted to talk about that blast from the past, that little bit of tease that I did here at the beginning of the show, and it's about Al Gore. Now, this is a guy that lost in historic fashion in 2000. Couldn't quite let go. I don't know if I blame him. I think that regardless of party, if you think that you won the presidency and you want to see every vote counted, I don't hold that against you. But it went very, very long. But in similar fashion, with the climate change stuff, he's sticking around. Now, and I'll be upfront with you guys. I believe that humans have some sort of impact on the world. How can you say that we don't? Right? I'm not saying global warming. That's not what I'm saying. Come back to me real quick, Tim. I'm not saying necessarily global warming. That's not what I'm saying. But like, if I throw a water bottle in the river, I've had some impact on the planet, right? Or I've had some impact on that ecosystem. If I dump trash in the river, I've had some impact. So I'm not anti-intellectual. I'm not willing to acknowledge. I'm not willing to blindly say that humans don't have some impact on the planet. Of course, we have some impact on the planet. Of course we do. Like all living animals, like all things. Of course we do. So I want to say that up front, because one of the number one things that the mainstream media and liberals try to do is they try to say that people that want a little bit more investigation, that they express a little more skepticism to what people like Al Gore are saying about the climate. They try to make us out to be stupid. They try to say that they say that it's outrageous that we want to acknowledge that the humans have some impact. And so I want to get that out of the way at the beginning and just say, of course we do. But that doesn't mean that we should wreck our entire our global economy in the process of getting off of fossil fuels. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's exactly what people like Al Gore are saying. And, so I'll give you an example here. I mean, so he has proposed something new. Al Gore wants to reverse what I would say is modernity in order to, quote unquote, save the world from itself. And that's through the elimination of the fossil fuels-based energy system. During the final week of April, his newly created Energy Transitions Commission, which sounds official, but it's really not, I mean, it's just something that he invented, released a document setting forth a fool's errand pathway to, quote unquote, decarbonize the world's energy. If this sounds familiar, it is, because Gore planned to do this as far back as 1992, when he wrote the book Earth in the Balance. It's when it was reissued in 2000 for his failed presidential campaign, and subsequent efforts by Gore during the past 25 years have done little to transform the discussion around climate change, but he's still moving forward with it. If you go through the verbiage that he's published, you'll see that at the core of the policy recommendations is a massive, punishing carbon tax. Al Gore wants to start the tax at $50 per ton. To put that into context, it would rise to over $100 a ton. To put that into context, it would cost us here in the United States, it would cost us $15 trillion. That's enough to put $46,000 in every American's pocket. It's not based in reality. This is political. I believe that there are some economic and socialist underpinnings to an effort like this. I believe that's what this is really about. It's about redistributing wealth from industrialized parts of the world that traditionally use more carbon emissions and trying to transfer some of that wealth to other parts of the world. I think that that's what this is really about. But he's pushing forward with it. And I think if you took this to voters, if you ask everyday Americans, including the vast majority of the Democrats, and you have to keep in mind, how many, I guess like 60 million Democrats voted for Hillary Clinton. So there are a lot of Democrats in this country, right? if you took something like this to the vast majority of those Democrats, they would laugh in your face. If you went to them and you said, I want to impose a $15 trillion tax for everything that for every aspect of your life, they would laugh in your face. And I think even Al Gore would laugh, if he's being honest with himself. Because this is a guy, right? He's a limousine liberal, right? We know them. We know a lot. I mean, they ride in the fancy cars that are chauffeured. They fly in private jets. They stay in the nicest hotels. They live in big mansions. Al Gore owns a bunch of big mansions, and their environmental impact on the globe is immense. So Al Gore, if you really believe in what you're saying, if you really believe in what you're spewing, then why don't you start at home? Why don't you start with your own carbon footprint? But that's not, he'll never do that, right? It's like people like, what's the actor? Leonardo DiCaprio, right? He's big on the anti-global warming stuff too. And meanwhile, he's jetting around in a private jet with just him, right? So these guys, they either are remarkably disingenuous, or this is part of an effort to get some other political boxes checked in the process. And maybe it's a little bit of both. So Al Gore, he can't take a hint, evidently. And for all of the Hollywood elites, all of the liberals that want to chastise Americans for, living in a home and eating meat, that's the next thing that they're going after, is they say that, we need to curb our consumption of certain foods because they have an outsized impact on the globe. So at the root of this, instead of trying to solve, if they really believe these problems, if they believe that, for instance, cows have a large carbon footprint, why don't you try to solve that instead of trying to change people's behavior and cramming it down their throats, especially when you won't even change your own behavior in the process. They want us to ride bicycles and eat kale. You're gonna have a hard time convincing most Americans to do that. I promise I'm not gonna start doing that. But that's the world we live in. And I promise, if you look at pictures of Al Gore, he's not eating any kale either. All right, that guy's not riding a bicycle. Look at this guy. All right, get over yourself. The next thing here, let's move on to the next story. We got a lot to cover, so I don't want to waste any time. And actually, I'm gonna save this for the end. But we have I said yesterday that I was thinking about making a daily segment of liberal fake news, and I do have one for you guys at the end of this, but I'm gonna save it for the end. And I think this would be a great segment. If you guys agree or disagree, let me know in the comments, or send an email to Submit News. If you want a daily update on the most outrageous fake news, confirmed fake news pushed on the left on the previous day, let us know. That'll be a segment at the end of this show. The next thing I want to cover here is Vladimir Putin. He is pushing, or he has just executed a massive Victory Day parade in Moscow. Vladimir Putin, he staged this monster military parade showcasing Russia's huge firepower and hailing his soldiers as heroes as they return from service in Syria. In front of thousands of adoring soldiers, the Russian President Vladimir Putin declared his armed forces were, quote, ready to repel any potential aggression. That's a clear warning to President Donald Trump. I think President Donald Trump probably has his own response for Vladimir Putin. At the annual Red Square March and Fly Past marked the end of World War II and the defeat of Hitler, so this is something they do every day. But Putin was using it today to showcase Russia's modern military might, with one senior Russian military commander saying, quote, it would make foreign foes salivate. The debut Victory Day March also included school children from a very patriotic, militarized part of Russia. It's a movement that they call Putin's Youth Army, which is actually very reminiscent. They're borrowing a title from Hitler Youth, so that's very concerning. It includes over 30,000 young Russians. So as part of this exercise in military might, they were showing off many surface-to-air missiles. They were showing off some anti-aircraft missiles, over 10,000 troops, over 114 vehicles, including tanks, and over 72 aircraft flying over above. Later today on the Harlan on the Hill, we're going to have Ryan Morrow, who's an expert on foreign policy and terrorism and counterinsurgency, and he is probably one of the best that you'll see on television and you've seen him a lot in here. He's joined us for the Walk and Talk and some of the other shows. He will be joining me today at 3 o'clock, and we're going to be discussing North Korea and obviously a lot of the instability in the Middle East. Russia and this display of might is you can't decouple what Russia is doing or what China is doing from the problems that we're trying to face in Syria and the problems that we're trying to negotiate in North Korea. Russia is a worldwide player, and we have to contend with them. We have to manage them, and President Donald Trump knows that. And you compare that to the previous administration. I'm going to get into a little bit of commentary here. You compare that to the previous administration, and you remember back in 2012 during the presidential debate, then President Barack Obama basically laughed at Mitt Romney when Mitt Romney said in the debate that the largest or the most significant threat to geopolitical stability was Russia. Barack Obama responded, what did he say? The 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back. Now, in hindsight, Mitt was absolutely spot on. And Russia is projecting its military might across not just the region, but the globe. And if you listen to Democrats, they're interfering in elections. Now, that has yet to be proven that they've had any material impact on any election, but that's what they're saying. So at the very least, President Barack Obama was proven to be absolutely and utter incompetent on this very important foreign policy issue. And you have to remember, it was under his administration that the State Department issued that that reset, the Russian reset. So much for that. The next thing I wanted to talk about here is Obamacare. Obamacare. I'm going to take a little bit different tack than I did yesterday, but because we've just learned that Obamacare premiums are going to rise in more states. We're getting some early preliminary numbers from 3 states. Those states are Maryland, Virginia, Connecticut. These are the first steps to make filings public that include the premiums for the Affordable Care Act plans that will rise more than 20% on average. That's according to data that is compiled by Bloomberg. The increases follow years of rising premiums under former President Barack Obama. The increases can be blamed in part on uncertainty among insurers about the strength of the law's requirement that people carry insurance. So the Trump administration has raised doubts about whether it will enforce what is considered by some insurers to be an already insufficient penalty. So you see here, according to one of the large insurance companies, they're saying that uncertainty around the law equals higher premiums. I'm not sure whether to believe them or not. I have a quote here from the chief executive officer of Care First, who's a very, very large insurer in this country. And the CEO, Chet Burrell, said, failure to enforce the individual mandate makes it far more likely that healthier, younger individuals will drop coverage and drive up the cost for everyone. The insurer is asking for at least a 50% increase in premiums in Maryland. So if you are going to buy health insurance, or if you carry health insurance and you live in Maryland, in some cases you're going to be looking at a 50% increase. And they're trying to blame this on the individual mandate. I find that somewhat hard to believe, but you know, that is the argument that they're making. I'm just reporting it so you can decide whether that makes any sense, and maybe some aspects of it do. Maybe it's also an excuse for them to wring more money out of the American people. The Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price said that the administration will do what it can to administratively support the reform effort on the Hill by reviewing and initiating administrative actions to bring down costs and increase choices for the American people. So the Trump administration is working on this. In the meantime, a lot of Americans are going to be suffering because of the policies that came out during the previous administration. That's to no fault of President Donald Trump, but that just kind of accentuates or punctuates just how serious this struggle is. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, another problem, and we saw this during the Obama years as well, is that because of all of the increased regulations, you saw a lot of insurers dropping out of markets. So I'll tell you, in the state of Connecticut, this is just one example. In the state of Connecticut, there are only 2 insurers taking part in the Affordable Care Act exchanges, and those 2 insurers, because there's so little competition, it's just 2 insurers. They're going to be increasing premiums by 24%. In Maryland, there are just 4 ACA insurers, and they're seeing a 45% increase in premiums. In Virginia, they have just 6 insurers. So this is statewide under the ACA, and they're seeing a 31% average premium increase. So this is a crisis if you live in one of those 3 states, and it's not just those 3 states. It's not just those 3 states. I just want to make sure this is clear. I'm giving you data for the three states for the only three states that have released data on this for the coming year. The picture is going to be so much worse from the fallout of Obamacare when the rest of the states report. So this is early days. It's going to be bad. This, in some ways, this might give ammunition to President Donald Trump to light a fire under the behinds of Democrats and Republicans alike to actually get something done that's going to help the American people, because this is a crisis. And Trump has said it. He put out a tweet. He said, "Insurance companies are fleeing Obamacare. It is dead. Our healthcare plan will lower premiums and deductibles and be great healthcare." I think there's room to improve on that, as I said in yesterday's Walk and Talk, but I appreciate that he's at least working to resolve this. Paul Ryan went on TV and he said, "What we're trying to do here is step in front of the collapsing law and make sure that we have a system that works, a system with choice and competition and affordable premiums." I sincerely hope that he's right. The next thing I want to talk about here, and I'm going to have to work from, let's see here if we can get it pulled up here. This was a story that was largely breaking as we went on air, or it wasn't breaking, but there were new details coming out about it. And Erdogan, who is the president of Turkey and is really emerging as a potential dictator in Turkey, is calling on all Muslims to flood Jerusalem's iconic mosque and protect their Islamic identity. The Turkish president compared Israel's policies to South Africa's apartheid system. The Turkish president, Erdogan, has called on Muslims around the world to visit the mosque to protect the identity, and the Turkish leaders are looking for an opportunity to heap scorn on Israel. Speaking at an Istanbul charity conference discussing Palestinian economic development, Erdogan lashed out at Israel. He said, "We as Muslims must be visiting Al-Quds, which is the Arabic name for Jerusalem, each and every day. We need to be flooding the city." As many as 26,000 Turks visit the Temple Mount every year, but he wants hundreds of thousands of Muslims flooding Jerusalem. This sounds like a very real threat to Israel. I think that that's probably what he really means by this. I think that it's a shot across the bow. You have to remember that Jerusalem's not just a cultural or a historic seat or holy site for Jews and Muslims, but also Christians. And so we all share a common interest in this. And so it's interesting and concerning that he's using such dangerous language on it. Though I'm not at all surprised. If you know anything about this guy, you've seen that there's been an increased consolidation in his power in Turkey. Turkey is an important strategic partner for the United States in that region because they have a pretty strong military. They are at a geographically important part of the globe where they're at the intersection of basically Asia and Europe. They literally span both those continents. And so it's strategically important for us. So it's very, very concerning that somebody like Erdogan has consolidated power in such a way that it's no longer really a true democracy, in my opinion. And it's also concerning because he is speaking rather aggressively about his not so far away neighbor, Israel. The next thing that I wanted to talk about here is our fake news story of the day. And this one came from BuzzFeed. Now, BuzzFeed has been pushing, and I'm going to pull it up here. BuzzFeed was tricked into publishing a fake news story. So trolls that were pretending to be a transgender gamer, or they were pretending to be several transgender gamers, plotted to fool BuzzFeed from the start. A group of these online comedians were plotting to fool BuzzFeed into posting completely fake news story about and they were successful after the social news and entertainment company published hoax claims that the group had denied entry to an all-female video game tournament because they were transgender. It said, quote, they said that there was a female-only tournament by a company that was known as ESL, or Electronic Sports League, for a game called Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We decided to pose as a transgendered pro team, and we made it as ridiculous as possible by uploading obvious troll pics to our profiles on the tournament's website, pics of us wearing wigs, etc. We knew we were going to be declined to join the tournament. So once we did get turned down, I sent the email to BuzzFeed journalist named Lane Saintney to try to bait them into making a story out of it. So these are obvious trolls, right? I mean, these are people that were trying to trick BuzzFeed, right, into publishing something that was obviously fake. That some transgender people were not admitted to a conference, and they were asked to show their passports to prove their gender and all of this. And BuzzFeed ran it because it fits their narrative, doesn't it? I mean, this is what we hear time and time again, that there's an enormous amount of transphobia. I think that's the term. And you know, look, I'm sure that there is. I'm sure that it's hard to lead a transgender life. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But what the mainstream media tries to do is to explode this and blow it out of proportion, and to make it seem as though these kinds of attacks and this kind of discrimination is commonplace, that it's something that is done on a regular basis across America. And if you look at this story, and if we don't have it on DennisMichaelLynch.com yet, I'll see if we can have it up there later today. This story is very illuminating, and it is a perfect example of what the mainstream media is willing to do, what outlets like BuzzFeed are willing to do, and how little due diligence they do as long as the story fits their narrative. You know, and that's to put this into context, you know, I was covering that story yesterday about Bill Maher saying absolutely disgusting, making absolute disgusting incest jokes about Ivanka Trump. And that went without any consequence in the mainstream media. And meantime, you have literal fake news stories like this being pushed by online trolls and picked up by mainstream media outlets and propagated and confirming the bias of their liberal readers and viewers. This is something that has become very commonplace. If you want to hear something about this every day, if you want a segment on fake news in the media every day, not just as it relates to President Donald Trump, because there's plenty of fake news on him coming out from the mainstream media, but you know, in other parts of society too, not just social issues, but also immigration and otherwise. If you want to hear more of that, I've got a whole backlog of it. I look at this every day. In fact, this could be, somebody should do a documentary on this just to show just how much fake news goes unreported on the left. Anyway, so I will be back later today with Ryan Mauro. As I said earlier in the program, he is one of the foremost experts. He's a professor. He's one of the foremost experts on foreign policy, and particularly the Middle East. So we're going to be talking about that, as well as North Korea. There have been some recent movements. We've had an election in South Korea, which could change some of the calculus as it relates to our working with South Korea to thwart the aggression by North Korea. So we'll be talking about that and what it means for you, because I do believe that we are potentially on the verge of some conflict, and it's concerning because you see people like Vladimir Putin, as I said earlier in the show, flexing his muscles, right? Trying to show off, trying to show his military capability. You have the Chinese that are doing the same thing. They've conducted live fire exercises. We'll be talking about that later today at Harlan on the Hill at 3 o'clock. So everybody in the region is flexing their muscles, and the North Koreans are increasingly indicating that they're not going to be stabilized, that they're not going to stand down, that they're not going to tolerate peace. So I'm concerned. And I know that we've talked about this, but there's some recent developments, and I want to make sure that we fill you in and show you some of the footage that we found from that live fire exercise in China as well. I think the Chinese, based on some of the reports I've read, are very concerned. They believe that the probability is significant that we may have conflict. And that's a problem for them, because if it were a nuclear conflict, they are in very close geographical proximity. So in terms of fallout, it would be a big problem for the Chinese, but also in terms of refugees flooding across their border. China has its own economic problems. Their economy has slowed from where it was. They have literally 1 billion people to provide jobs and food for. I mean, it is a very high, very high burden that they have put themselves in. And so they have their own problems. They do not want the distraction of a conflict right on their border. And that is potentially what we could have here. And at the same time, China has come to the table with the United States, and under the leadership of President Donald Trump, they've been willing to work with Americans for the first time in a long time to bring North Korea to bear. And so there have been positive developments. But at the same time, and I don't want to give away too much about what we're going to be talking about later today on Harlan on the Hill, but I'll also say that, President Donald Trump had the guts to stand up and put a missile defense system in South Korea, and the Chinese did not like that because it would neutralize their capability to project their power across Asia. So, we are in a delicate balancing act, not just with North Korea, but the Chinese, the Russians, and we're working with our allies in Japan, South Korea, and Australia as well to try to maintain as much peace as we can. I think this is important, but it is concerning because we're not talking about just some tin pot dictatorship like Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Even though Kim Jong-un is absolutely insane, he's also developed nuclear weapons. He has a capability that is significant, and it could threaten the United States homeland if we don't address the problem today. So that will be the focus of Harlan on the Hill this afternoon. Make sure you tune in. We've got a lot of information. We've got a lot of videos. We've got a lot of exclusive analysis as well there in the 3 o'clock hour with Ryan Morrow. So you don't want to miss that. Thank you guys again so much for joining me. Dennis will be back in tomorrow, and he's traveling, but he will be back in tomorrow, and we're going to be getting up and rolling here and producing a lot of live shows out here. I'm not sure if the weather's going to be nice tomorrow, if we're going to be doing a walk and talk by phone or out here on the patio or what. But when I talk to Dennis, we'll figure that out. And thank you guys so much for joining us. If you love what we're doing, make sure to go to DennisMichaelLynch.com and click on some articles and read them. That's how we fund this operation. But if you want to go a little bit further and help us underwrite what we're doing here, help pay for Tim and myself and everybody else that we're adding to the staff here, as well as our studio and the cameras that we have to buy and maintain, and even the batteries for these. I got to tell you guys, the batteries, these things eat batteries, these sound packs, these mic packs. So yeah, there are all kinds of hidden costs that you wouldn't expect with running a studio like this. And it adds up, lights, electricity, everything. So if you love what we're doing, you want to help us underwrite this operation. If you want to see more of Dennis, you want to see more of myself, you want to see more of Scarlett, see a lot more of Scarlett, see more of the other talent that we're bringing in, go to DennisMichaelLynch.com/donate and throw us a couple bucks. We penny pinch. Like, seriously, we're very cheap around here. We penny pinch, and every dollar will go towards something that is important to running this studio, not into anyone's pocket. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys at 3 o'clock here on Facebook and on the website, DennisMichaelLynch.com. Talk to you later.